everyone, my name's Madre. I'm with ArtSpect, and we have Kim Keller here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So can you first tell us a little bit about yourself and what your background is?
Sure. So I'm Kim Keller, and I farm with my parents and my brother in Northeast Saskatchewan. However, growing up, I didn't have any interest in the farm or being a part of the agriculture industry, but that changed in 2011. And I decided that farming was something that I wanted to do, and being a part of this industry was, in my future. In 2012, I co-founded a farm tech company called Farm at Hand, and that took us actually out to Vancouver. In 2016, we sold that company to another Canadian company, and I decided to come back and farm full-time. And I'm also a co-founder of Saskatchewan Women in Ag, and our mandate is to support, empower, and connect women across the industry to strengthen agriculture as a whole.
That is quite a resume. So a while ago you tweeted, "Egg, we gotta do more." What was the story behind that, and where did that come from?
Sure. So in 2017, during the summer, I received a message from someone over Twitter that I had never met or spoken to. However, during my time at Farm at Hand, our team had started a t-shirt campaign to support farmers' mental health, with all of the proceeds going to the Farm Stress Line. And during that time, this person had seen us trying to push forward the conversation around mental health and agriculture. And he had just lost one of his farming clients to suicide, and he thought I might be able to help. And he was looking for help for the family that had just lost their family member, but also for other farmers that he thought might be struggling. And when I got that message, I didn't really know what to do. We had started that conversation 2 years ago, and here we were in the exact same spot. So the next day, I decided to send a call to action out to the industry and just say that we had to do more for our farmers.
And how was the response for that?
Much more than I would have ever expected. So there's been, an outpouring of support from both farmers and industry. And we have farmers sharing their stories, and they're sharing them publicly on social media or at events, but they're also sharing them privately for the first time within their existing support networks. And I mean, even corporate ag has been doing a lot. They're looking and saying, our frontline staff deal with this every day. What can we do to support them and our farmers? And I'll give you a little example of sort of how this all hit home for me, and I think a few others. So during the APAS Carbon Summit this summer, just 2 weeks after that tweet had been sent out, the membership actually voted in favor of a resolution to recognize the importance of working with both farmers and government to improve rural health offerings, and they specifically mentioned mental health as a focus. During that event, I actually moderated my very first panel on mental health and agriculture. And I remember when we were done, there was a lineup of men at the mics. And I looked over at my panel and I was like, "Kate," we were kind of all bracing ourselves. And the first gentleman stood up and he goes, "It's about damn time we're talking about this." And then we got more stories with people with tears sharing their experiences. And that same gentleman, he held up both of his hands and he goes, "If I really think about it, and I start to count on my hands the number of people I've lost to suicide, I run out of fingers." And that's when it hit myself and everyone else in that room, how close to the surface this really is within our industry.
Mm-hmm. So why is it hard for people to talk about your story, and what are kind of the barriers for people?
Right, so in agriculture, I think we deal with a few different barriers. The first one, I think, being the stigma around mental health and mental illness, and just how that works with the culture that we built in agriculture. So when we think about farmers, we usually think about a guy, and that guy has to be tough, and he's the leader in his business, the leader in his farm, and sometimes also the leader in the community. So there's this idea that if he were to need help, that would be a sign of weakness, which simply isn't true. And what we've seen is that more and more people are sharing their stories, and it doesn't take a lot to start to break down that stigma and break down that culture. It just takes really one person to stand up in a room and start talking or share their story publicly, and you just see that stigma starting to basically go away. Secondly, I just think in general, there's a lack of knowledge and awareness around what mental health is, what mental illness is, and just really how it impacts each of us. And I think that if we start to talk about it more, it normalizes it, and we gain a lot of information about what it is, what it isn't, and what it truly means for each one of us to be healthy. And lastly, I think the rural location and sort of the isolation plays a big part as a barrier to anyone talking about it or getting help. When we think about it, most farms are located in rural areas, and farmers spend a lot of time by themselves, like in a cab of a piece of equipment. And that's not very conducive to having a conversation or reaching out for help. And that can really amplify that feeling of, I'm alone in this, or I'm the only one feeling this. And I think that's why you see a lot of people in agriculture turning to social media and Twitter to really build out their community, because it doesn't matter if you're, 10 miles away from someone or 50 or even, across the world. That support network is still there, because you don't need to be in the exact same place to reach out for help.
That's a great thing about technology is we have Skype and we have all that to do that. So we kind of talked about people sharing their story and that, but what can we do on an individual level and also as a community?
Right. So I think there's some pretty simple things that we can do. And those three things being talk more, ask more, and listen more. And what I mean by that is when I say talk more, I don't mean just talking about your own stories or your own experiences, but simply just talking about mental health, mental illness, so it starts to normalize the conversation and it's no longer awkward or hard to have. When I say ask more, lately I've seen a lot of farmers asking questions about how they can improve their mental health or thrive while living with a mental illness. And we have a long way to go to gaining really good understanding about how this impacts us, and we're not going to get there if we don't ask more questions. And lastly, listen more. Sometimes all someone needs is an ear to listen. When I've talked to people from the Farm Stress Line, they have said that sometimes people call in just because they need someone to talk to. They have no idea who they can listen, who will listen to them. You don't always have to be the expert. Sometimes just being that person that's there is enough.
Perfect. So thank you so much for sharing your story and that. My last question is, if someone is going through something or a family member is kind of having another member go through something, what are some resources that they can use?
Sure. So there are resources out there. Sometimes they're a little bit tough to find, but a few that come to the top of my mind are one, Mobile Crisis and the Farm Stress Line. They're there 24 hours a day, and it is completely confidential. The U of R actually has a really great program called User Therapy, and it's free to all Saskatchewan residents. And if you're wanting to learn more about, your mental health and more about mental illness, there's also a company called Bridges Health, and they provide mental health first aid and other programs for businesses if they really want to take a look at the psychological health of their business and their employees as well. So those are the three off the top of my head. However, if you're in agriculture and you need someone to talk to, there is an amazing industry here behind you and you are not alone. Reach out to someone, anyone. They'll be there for you.
Yeah, and with that being said, I also want to open up Facebook, message us, DM us on Instagram and all of that, whatever you need to just talk to someone. We'd love to both help out in any way we can. And also sometimes it takes a conversation to get you to the next step, so we'd love to help out. You're not in it alone if you are suffering. So thank you so much for letting us know about all of that. And